Okay. So I think we're ready to get going. I apologize to everybody for the delay. Thank you very much to everybody for being here. This is the City Council primary candidate forum sponsored by the Charlottesville Democrats. I'm John McLaren, chair of the Charlottesville Democrats. I just want to pause for a moment to thank the staff of the Buford Middle School, especially custodian Joe Blakey for helping us set everything up. Christina Duran and Deborah Fields for going behind the scenes, and the principal for making the space available to us. And certainly want to thank the candidates for running and also for being here today. Just to take one second, we are the Charlottesville Democrats. If you want to keep up with the events going on that are put in by Charlottesville Democrats, the best place to go is cvilledems.org, which people on Zoom can see. People in person have to take my word for it. cvilledems.org. You can also on that page sign up for our newsletter, which will keep you really informed. And you can follow us on Twitter and on Facebook, and you can always send us email at cvilledems@gmail.com, which is also on the webpage. And we have an upcoming spectacular event. Our second annual summer spectacular bash, which is on June 2nd at 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. You can get tickets to that by going to cvilledems.org. They're $25 a pop, but 15 if you're a first time attendee. There'll be lots of food and fun, and Lindley Thorne of the Rural Ground Game will give a little rousing speech about her plans together with us to bring the Democratic message into the rural parts of Virginia. So I hope to see you there on June 2nd. I'll turn things over to our moderator, Lewis Combs. Take it away, Lewis.
Thank you, John. So let me introduce myself. I'm Lewis Combs. I'm a local attorney, do criminal defense work. I've also worked with both Commonwealth Attorney's Office for Charlottesville and Albemarle, and right now I'm just doing lawyer work in Charlottesville. But let me tell you a little bit about the format for tonight. So the first phase of the presentation or the forum, each candidate will have 4 minutes to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their goals and themselves, and then after that ends, then we will start questions. The questions will be randomly selected. They will have 2 minutes to answer each question. At the end of 2 minutes, Suzanne has graciously agreed to be the timer for all this, so she will hold up a hand when it's time to stop. Finish your thought, but don't finish your paragraph. Okay, so I would say that since this is a forum, we would ask you to not talk directly about your opponents. If you have ideas or what sets you apart, that's fine. But since it's not a debate format, it would be unfair to attack an opponent or make it so that they would need time to respond. So having said that, we have randomly drawn the names out of a hat, literally. So the first order, the person to give their introduction First person would be Mr. Cooper. Mr. Cooper, you have 4 minutes, please.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. My name is Daeshad Cooper, lifelong resident of Charlottesville. Grew up here, went through the school system, Clark, Johnson, Walker, Buford, and then CHS. And then I spent 1 year at Monticello to come back to graduate. Currently still attending Piedmont. And I currently work for the Department of Social Service in the city of Charlottesville. Just coming off of being co-chair with John as well from last year. One of the things that I would love to do is keep our kids active, have some incentives so they're not getting in trouble. I want to tackle mental health. That's probably one of my biggest things, and definitely get our transportations up and running. Early voting has started, ends June 17th. Of course, I know the primary is June 20th. Definitely get out to vote. And again, thank you all for this event, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. If I could go out of order just briefly. So I know Amanda Burns is here, who's running for school board, and I forgot to bring this up before. Amanda, are you out there somewhere? So I believe you are collecting signatures for your petition.
That is correct.
And would be glad to talk with anyone when this is over and answer questions. And so we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate you taking on the effort to run the school. Thank you. So the next person up to introduce themselves would be Mr. Fenwick, please.
Oh, okay. Good evening to y'all who came down here today, and to the Zoomers who dialed in or clicked in, whatever. Tom Olivier from Charlottesville 100 was good enough to give us 4 questions on the environment, and just to,
Not that one, but
oh,
the other one, the voices carrying all the way to the back for people deciding.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. It's a 2 mic problem.
testing 1, 2, okay. All right, well, then I guess I'll have to start over. Look, y'all have seen me enough over the years. I think you know, I've been here 47 years. Both boys attended school. Last time I was in this auditorium, it was for a music venue kind of thing, and I was very proud of them. So I know the city. I've been here a long time. For many years, my wife practiced law, and we live on the east end of the downtown mall. So long time. I think I know the city. I know when there were blue laws. I know when there was a fighter jet in McIntyre Park, which many of you will remember. So I'm going to get right into what Tom Olivier from Charlottesville 100 gave us. And if you want to know more about what his organization is, all you have to do is Google Charlottesville 100 Environmental, and it'll be the first one that comes up. So the first 3 questions basically are about fossil fuels and natural gas and methane. And the third one is about battery powered electric buses. So I'm going to just speak quickly on fossil fuels and energy generation. This is a situation where you start at the bottom of an issue before you work your way up to a particular action or program, because it is important to get a baseline for this particular issue and others like it. But the first thing you should see when you get these situations is who gets the free installation? What is the contract language governing the installations? And are there any penalties for rescission of the contract? Maybe there are special circumstances for the hookup, like subsidized housing. Is the deal the city gives whoever gets the free hookup, is it a quid pro quo? Of course, solar power, and to a lesser extent, wind power, even hydro power, are no-brainers. The citizens of Charlottesville fully support these alternative sources of energy. But we have to always keep in mind unintended consequences of our policies. And it's about buses as well. Battery buses, fuel driven by electric batteries. China and Zambia are the 2 largest producers of cobalt and probably lithium, which are mined for use in the batteries that the buses use, which means that children are a large part of their supply chain. We should make sure our efforts are not just outsourcing the environmental problems to a different part of the world. We did it with blood diamonds. We can do it with materials used in the mining and manufacturing of batteries. It seems that more often than not, those with the smallest voices bear the heaviest burden. We shouldn't further our environmental goals on the backs of children. So next one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next person to introduce themselves is Ms. Oshram.
Hello, hi. I see some familiar faces out there, but for the rest of you, I am Natalie Ostrin. I'm excited to be running for Charlottesville City Council. Thank you for your interest in the campaign and for showing up tonight to hear about the issues that with yourself. Issues like regular hardworking people should be able to find a place to live in the city where they work. It should be safe to walk on continuous sidewalks and bike in lanes that aren't afterthoughts. Our public transit system should be frequent, reliable, and usable. Our community should be safe from gun violence. Our kids and teachers should have the schools they deserve. I've lived in Charlottesville since I was less than a year old. I'm a proud graduate of Charlottesville City Schools and will offer strong support to the school system as a counselor. I spent my summers volunteering at Martha Jeff and scooping ice cream on the downtown mall before going to UVA for undergrad. Charlottesville is and has always been my home. I've worked in the hospitality industry for over 10 years, mostly planning and organizing weddings. As you might imagine, there's a lot of coordinating and managing, in addition to cajoling and negotiating, that need to happen to pull off the event successfully and within budget. My background in business and building consensus with a wide variety of clients in an emotional and deadline-driven context has prepared me well for public service. I am fortunate to be able to live in town. Others are not so fortunate. There's a well-documented shortage of housing in the city. I have worked with people who have to commute from outlying counties for their job in the city, spending close to an hour in the car each way. Our teachers, nurses, firefighters deserve to live in Charlottesville and not be pushed out by high housing costs. It is not only a personal predicament for them, it is one that affects us all. Building more housing and investing in affordable housing will offer opportunities for people from all walks of life to live in our city. Rents will be more affordable, and owning a home close to where you work can be a real possibility. I'm looking forward to jumpstarting the discussion of how to get our lives to be less car-centric. We live in a community that wants to walk and bike, that wants to easily use public transit, that wants to address the climate crisis, and wants to reduce traffic and pollution. We have the resources to make big changes. We've been promising sidewalks and bike lanes for decades. It's time to do them. I have the skills and credentials to effectively move this initiative forward, and with your support, we can make real changes. Since 1971, there has always been at least one woman on City Council representing the citizens of Charlottesville. I intend to keep that streak alive. Women's participation in politics helps advance gender equality and affects both the range of policy issues that get considered and the types of solutions that are proposed. Charlottesville women must have a voice at the table, and with your support, we can keep that seat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Payne, if you would introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Apologies if I squint with the light coming at me. But yeah, thank you for organizing this. Thank you all for coming out. Is the mic on? There we go.
Yes.
And it's good to be here, especially after the schools in the city just secured a $17 million grant for a new auditorium and performing arts center for Buford. But anyway, for those who don't know me, my name is Michael Payne. I grew up in the Charlottesville area, graduated from Albemarle High School, and after college moved back here to work with Habitat and have worked in affordable housing with them as well as Potcham, and got involved in local politics through community organizing, co-founding Indivisible Charlottesville, as well as working with groups like the Charlottesville Low Income Housing Coalition. And I ran for city council in 2019 because I believed that local government can play a real meaningful role in improving the lives of people in our community. And I would be lying if I said that that faith has not been tested a few times over the past several years, but I still believe that it's true. And over the past 3.5 years, we've been able to do some incredible things in local government. We were the first local government in Virginia to set an emissions reduction target goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. We've adopted a climate action plan with millions of dollars of funding for implementation. We've adopted an affordable housing plan and have invested over $10 million a year annually in affordable housing, the highest per capita affordable housing expenditure in the state of Virginia. And we're seeing units come online at Friendship Court, South First Street, Crescent Halls, and seeing our investments finally being able to pay off. And we've also made significant progress towards creating a regional transit authority through our regional transit partnership, as well as electrification of our municipal fleet. There's the strongest collective bargaining ordinance in the state, a police civilian oversight board with subpoena investigatory power. There's a lot we've done, but we get reports all the time that show that Charlottesville still faces significant problems. We have an extreme income gap where the median Black household in Charlottesville makes $39,000, where that number is $86,000 for the median white family in Charlottesville. We have an achievement gap in our schools that grew over the pandemic. Over 50% of renters in our city are cost burden. Our homeless population in 1 year doubled. So we need to continue to build on the good work that we've started. And I hope if reelected that I'm able to do that through implementation of our climate action plan and our affordable housing plan, finishing out rebuilding our city staff and building a strong team for a purpose to improve the lives of people in Charlottesville. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thane. Mr. Snook, if you would introduce yourself, please.
My name is Lloyd Snook. I guess I've been a Charlottesville resident for about 62 years. I went to Venable and Walker and Lane High School, went away to college, away to law school, came back with my wife, who's here in the audience, Sheila Hoy, and we have raised 3 really cool kids, coming through the Charlottesville school system. When I decided to run 4 years ago, I was concerned about the fact that Charlottesville's government wasn't working, that it was just chaos at the top. I had basically 2 different variations of a theme. One was that I wanted to work together. I wanted us to, as a city council, as a council with the government, to work together. And generally, I just wanted to make Charlottesville work again. We had all these efficiency studies that were telling us about 70 different areas that needed to get fixed and things that weren't working right. And so that was all stuff that we needed to fix, and we weren't doing it. So when I was elected, and I should say, I ran basically 4 substantive platform planks. One was to do something about affordable housing. 2 was to begin to plan and to think of ourselves as a city and not simply a suburban town, with what that would mean for things like transit, having a reliable transit system. We needed to deal with both 2 different aspects of an education problem. One is the achievement gap, and the other was simply school reconstruction. We knew we needed to do this major project at Buford, but that had never gotten off the ground. It had been talked about for a decade, but it had never gotten off the ground. And finally, we need to do something about climate action. And I'm glad to say that on all of those, we have at least made good starts. We're not finished yet. And part of what I want to do is to be able to finish the job. Did this thing just cut off? Yeah, well, hello, nope. Well, I'm just going to talk loud. That's not really a problem for me. So in terms of finishing the job, we've got to go ahead. I gather that the groundbreaking on the Buford reconstruction is going to start like any time now in the next month. But after that, we've got to do something about Walker, because the entire premise was we were going to bring these kids into Buford. Walker would then become a universal pre-K kind of a facility. That's going to be another whole lot of money. The individual schools are going to need serious attention as well. On the climate action plan, there are little things that are already starting to happen. For example, in this year's budget, for the first time, 4 years ago, I campaigned on the idea of LED streetlights. And finally, in this budget cycle, we're going to get LED streetlights. So that's starting the process. It's beginning to get going. We have other things like that we need we've started, we need to finish. Michael touched on a couple of them. The Police Civilian Oversight Board. When we came in, there was a rather confusing muddle of a statute, of an ordinance. And then finally, a couple of years ago, we rewrote the ordinance. And one of the things that's important, I want to mention this because it shows something about how we can work together, that what we did was I went around to everybody on council and said, okay, what are the issues that we're really fighting about? And it turned out there were really only about 3 or 4 things that we're really fighting about. And once we were able to talk to one another, and once we were able to figure out what those 4 issues were, then we were able to come to a vote that actually made sense. And we passed an ordinance. We've got to get it implemented. It's, I think, working pretty well, or it has potential to work pretty well. We did the same thing with collective bargaining. And so we've got a lot more work to do, but the point is we've started it and I want to finish it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I would hope that you would agree with me that we have an excellent slate of candidates here, and we appreciate them being here. They're kind of on the, it's like a 60s or 70s spy movie. So they're up here under the bright light. So bear with them. We'd also like to say that we appreciate you as concerned citizens coming out. Government doesn't work unless everyone takes part in it, and we appreciate you all coming as well. So the next segment of the forum is I will ask a question. Each candidate will have about 2 minutes. We'll have 2 minutes to answer the question. And we will start off, I've done these randomly as well. So the first person, Mr. Snook, the question is this: methane is an extremely powerful and damaging greenhouse gas, and reducing it is key to limiting the extent of climate change. Should the city stop expanding gas service for new residential and construction or residential construction? And also, I think there was an additional question that talked about, I think we supplement connections for some folks and make that free. So what are your feelings? Should we continue that or should we not?
As a general proposition, I am in favor of cutting back on the subsidies on methane, natural gas in general. Let me just mention a procedural point. This is an issue that we've talked about in terms of wanting to study. Again, I think it just cut out again. Wanting to study it, and it's not simply an environmental question. It's also an equity question. At least at this point, gas is the most cost-effective way to heat a house. And so if we cut back on gas, we make it more expensive for people to live. For some people, particularly poor people, that's a problem. And one of the things that I want to do is when we do this study, I want the study to reflect not only on the economic side of not only on the environmental side of things, but also on the economic side of things. And maybe the answer is that we no longer subsidize the installations for anything that is not an affordable unit of housing, but we maintain that subsidy for affordable units. There may be some other things like that, but it is not as easy as saying, okay, I've got the answer and boom, there it is, because there's a lot of development of this issue that we have to undergo, and we have to understand how it's going to work. We have to understand all the different places it's going to have effects. I'm in favor of it. I don't want to rush into it precipitously. I think we're probably going to have significant changes on that in the next year to year and a half. I just can't. I'm not going. You know, I may be the mayor, but I don't have the power to order something like that, and I'm not going to try to.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Kenwood, same question.
If I can get this.
Yep.
There you go. All right, well, I touched on this very quickly on my opening remarks, so I'm basically going to review them because it's pretty important. And I mentioned that when you get these situations, you have to start from the bottom up. You have to know what you're dealing with. And you have to know if the free installation is going to say a corporation, say a big corporation. It might be a quid pro quo to get them to come into town and create jobs or into our community, whatever. You have to know that. And you have to know.
Just went away. Talk loud.
And you have to know.
Have to know how to operate them.
And you have to know. It's called rebooting. You have to know, if the contracts that the city is working on, what the terms of those are. Is there a penalty for cutting the contract? If it's a rescission, you have to know if there's a penalty that's coming, and there's so many things you know before you embark on some kind of a program that you know is going to cost a great deal of money. You have to know if the benefit is going to go to people who really need it, for one thing. Like the lower income people, they have to have heat during the winter. It's those kinds of things, and you fold them all in, and then you decide what the best course forward would be. And we all are cognizant of the other sources of power, solar, wind, even hydropower. Those are growing as we, almost on a daily basis. The panels on the roofs, you see more and more of those. So that's coming, but we're in a transition period and we have to recognize that.
Thank you. Ms. Oshrin, same question.
Sure. Yes. But I'll expand a little more. I want to touch on the equity issue a little bit, because while it might be more cost effective in payment, that's going to shift the better we get at alternative forms of energy. And as we've seen with urban renewal and highway development, the folks that get hit with the environmental ramifications the most are minorities and low income folks. General environmental pollution is bad and is mostly concentrated in those areas. Same would be the case if we allowed affordable or low income housing to be the only ones with in-house natural gas. We know that it causes increased rates of asthma in kids. It's bad for health and other reasons. So if we just allow those homes and those developments to have gas in the house, we are giving those kids more of an opportunity to have bad health outcomes. So that's something to consider. Something we could do is switch our subsidies to something like heat pumps, which are super efficient, work well in a moderate climate like ours, and would be a great way to keep more equitable distribution of the subsidy and reduce our dependence on natural gas.
Thank you. And last, Mr. Cooper, please. Oh, did I miss one?
Yeah.
Mr. Payne, I'm sorry.
I don't know which one.
Mr. Payne said, Mr. Payne, you hadn't,
I have not, no.
okay, so you are next.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I think when we're thinking about the future of our natural gas utility, we have to base our decisions in climate science. And if you read the IPCC reports, you read the current state of climate, they talk about it in existential terms. This is an emergency, and we're seeing backsliding at a state and federal level. And natural gas long-term is not going to be part of our climate solution. And you're talking on a 30, 40-year time horizon. A lot of this natural gas investment we make is going to result in stranded assets. So I think as a city, we don't have an option but to move in the direction of lessening the reliance on natural gas and incorporating electrification into their portfolio. I think the advantage we have is that Seville Gas is a municipally owned utility, which actually gives us more power and latitude to do interesting things. I think some of the biggest things we could do when it comes to electrification for low-income homeowners or renters, there is tons of federal money now through the Inflation Reduction and Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Our utility can be providing that information to homeowners and renters so they can access those programs. There is also billions of dollars of federal money now for municipally owned utilities. And the way I look at it is, how do we transition the business model of our municipally owned utility to incorporate electrification into their portfolio? I think we have a very unique opportunity now with the billions of dollars of federal money that the Biden administration and Congress passed to take significant action. All that said, if I were to tell you I knew all the steps or the timeline from where we can do that, I would be lying. This is not going to be something that happens overnight. There is no one easy answer, but we know this has to be the direction that we head in.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Cooper, thank you.
Thank you. Quickest answer, yes. I grew up on the gas. So, I mean, I can say that, you know, a couple of my brothers got asthma from it. Like Michael said, we own the gas company, so we're in a unique position to cut back very, very slowly, but definitely have a solution on when we cut back, because that's gonna cut back on revenue. So we're gonna have to fill that void. So at the end of the day, we're gonna have to make tough decisions. It's gonna be some consequences with the tough decisions, but it won't affect us now. It's gonna affect us later on down the road. So let's just do the common sense thing and cut back.
Thank you.
You alternatives would mean that
Agreed.
I agree.
So we're at the end of the first question. If anyone, since the mic's cutting in and out, does anyone want to move closer at this time? So I'll wait on the question till you're able to move down. That way it won't interrupt or disturb anybody. All right. The next question would be, what would be your thoughts on gun violence in Charlottesville? Possible solutions that the city could implement to lessen violent crimes and violent gun crimes. First person is Mr. Fenwick, please.
All right. Excuse me. Let me start by saying the way we're gonna get this under control, the way we're gonna manage this is not from the city down. It's gonna be from the neighborhoods up. It's gonna be from the churches. The ministers know that there's a serious problem and they've started jumping back in. Organizations like the Buck Squad. And it's B-U-C-K, it is
Brothers United to Cease the Killing.
to cease the killing, yes. And it's a grassroots organization where you get these young fellas who are hanging out in the corner and just have a lot of energy and testosterone, and you work with them. I've always been a big fan of mentoring and coaching. Some of the young fellas do not want to go into coding. I try to make sure they know that there's opportunities in the trades, anything to keep them busy. And I think that's one of the most important things is know your city, walk the city so you can talk to people. It won't be long before you find out things that you know who the troublemakers are. They do. They know who the bad actors are in their neighborhoods. And you just have to know that you're there. And if they have a problem that they can't handle, that they have backup. So these things come and go in waves. And the police chief is on top of this as best he can be. The city council, of course, is working on this. So these fellows didn't mean it, but they've got our attention. And we'll bring to bear whatever resources we can to make sure that we calm the city down and that these young fellows have a clear path forward. Some of these guys are just lost. When I was that age, I was lost. I left home, went to Florida, and got involved in a gang. I didn't see what you had there. Is that it? Okay. Stop.
Thank you. Ms. Oshrin, same question, please.
Sure. What I think we need to do in city council, like city council, we don't have the power to say you can't have guns in Charlottesville. I personally would like that. Obviously, that's not going to happen, especially not coming from this body. But what we need to do and what we have the power to do is focus our resources and allocate money to do support systems to prevent gun violence. That includes, giving funds to Buck Squad, promoting active, other active groups like Moms Demand Action. But what we need to do is focus our resources on prevention, not reaction. So that includes making sure that people have somewhere safe to live that is within their budget. Housing insecurity causes job insecurity, it causes mental health stress, it causes academic achievement gaps. All of that can lead to gun violence. We need to provide after-school activities and extracurricular activities for youth to engage in so that they have something to do in their spare time. And then The other thing we need to do is make travel to and from activities or to and from jobs safe, accessible, and reliable. And that includes bus routes, that includes sidewalks that are connected, that includes bike lanes, so that kids have the freedom to get to where they need to go safely. And that gives them more opportunities to engage with the community around them, with jobs, with friends, with things that aren't necessarily guns, gun violence, and those more criminal activities.
Thank you very much. Mr. Payne, please.
Sure. Well, the first thing is, no kid deserves to live in a neighborhood where they are scared to walk home from the bus to school or go outside to play. And that is the situation in some of our neighborhoods. And the people who have lost their lives, they're not a statistic, they're not a news story. These are individuals who their families, their kids are feeling that pain and trauma for generations. And city council does not have all the answers, but there are things that we can do. I think we need to look at evidence-based solutions. Some of them is there's clear research that investments in neighborhoods, things like lighting, trees, sidewalks, does make a meaningful impact. One of the most impactful interventions is investment in youth mentorship for at-risk youth. I think the Uhuru Foundation and Robert Gray have been doing incredible work in that area. The Buck Squad is another model for that. Last budget cycle, we invested $161,000 in the Buck Squad, as well as $200,000 for gun violence prevention programs, which is not finally decision on allocating yet, but will go to programs. We've also invested in youth programs. And the final component is you need to have real community policing where police are not an invading army in neighborhoods. There is actual trust. There is some level of control from the community. And you move towards that model. There is no one answer that is going to solve this. As others had mentioned, you have a fundamental problem of a country with over 400 million guns. But those are some of the things we've been doing that I think we can build off of. And as others have said, it has to start from the bottom up in the neighborhoods. It cannot be a top-down solution from city council because it's not going to have buy-in or trust.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper, please.
First want to say, majority of these shootings are actually happening in neighborhoods that I'm living in. There's no punt to neither one of my council members. We have to make sure as council members, we're not also just sitting there and just talking, but being out in the community, listening, being there, banding resources together with other organizations to find activities for kids. I was once one of those kids. Well, not the shooting part, but once one of those kids being bad, but sports and having a mentor and teachers that really cared about me, come to me to let me know, told me every day that, you know, you're a leader, you're going to do it, you're going to make it. And, you know, making a whole U-turn to go in a different way and trying to go in a positive way. Yes, it's much harder. Of course, it's easy being bad, but we just have to, you know, keep putting the dream and hope into these kids. Just like the old saying, it takes a village.
Thank you. Mr. Snook, if you could finish out that question, please.
Sure. There are basically three responses or three things we need to talk about. The first is policing. We need to be supporting Chief Koches's efforts to community policing of walking and talking in the neighborhoods. And that's a part of a couple of folks have touched on that this evening. The second thing related to that is that we need to make sure that we have integrated a mental health response to mental health crises. Some of these situations that we're seeing are situations where there's a mental health issue. It's not just people being mean and people being, you know, I mean, sometimes it is, but there are also some times where it's just flat out, there's a mental health issue. We need to have basically we need to put our mental health system back together again. The second thing I would point out, we talked this year in the budget cycle, we allocated $161,000 to the Buck Squad, as Michael mentioned. We also allocated another $250,000 for various youth programs. We allocated $200,000 without specific direction at this point for violence prevention measures, some of which may go to the Uhuru Foundation, as Michael mentioned. So there are some things like that that we're working on. The one thing that I hope we will start to work on more is to make sure that everybody who comes through Charlottesville school system comes out of that school system with either a path to college or a trade. We have not done a good job on emphasizing the trade piece of that, and we need to. The last point I would make is to borrow a line from Marion Wright Edelman, who said that the best prevention for all of this is a future that a child can believe in. If we can give these children a future they can believe in, that we'll turn them away from the violence.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So I'm really enjoying this, hearing the question come from different angles, the answers, and I hope you are enjoying this as well. So each candidate has probably hit on this a little bit in their opening, but the question is, you can expand on your take on this issue. What is the single most significant goal you wish to achieve in the next 4 years? First candidate, Ms. Oshman.
Let's build some sidewalks. My street, I live downtown, near Mead Park. There is one house that has a sidewalk in front of it and the rest of the block is empty, which means everyone walking down my street to get to the trail or to get to work or to get to their jobs or to get to the bus stop or to get to school has to walk in the middle of the road. That is a fixable problem. That is something that we have allocated money towards in the past, and we have a backlog of that, even though we have not allocated any in the current budget, recent budget. The allocation for it has gone down significantly over the last couple of years. We need to spend that money. We're going to hear people say that we don't have project managers for it. I think we can find some. We can use that as a workforce development opportunity as well and train folks. Now that we have K-Tech, we could use that to train folks to do, to add bus driving to the classes you can take, add sidewalk engineering, project management, that sort of thing. So we can integrate that into the solution. And then that couples with the long-term goal that hopefully we can achieve on a shorter term of increasing our housing so that the folks who have somewhere to live downtown can walk or bike, so they don't need to get in cars. People are often afraid of more neighbors, meaning more traffic. And I don't think that necessarily has to be the case, but we have to have that alternative infrastructure so that folks don't need to get into their cars to get to where they want to go to safely.
Thank you. Mr. Tang, same question.
Number one goal, and I think it is achievable, is that resident-led redevelopment of West Haven is invested in, begins to happen, and our city keeps that promise. That's it.
Okay,
That's
good. Mr. Cooper, please.
Oh, you make it so hard. There's so many things. So really, I'm big on mental health. But I got a text from my mom today, in the same school that my little brother started vaping. He's only 12. So kind of conflicted between mental health and, of course, education, but we touch on education because of what happened today with that. We need to start educating our kids a little bit more about, vaping. It's a new thing that has came out, pretty deadly. Not at first, everybody think it's cool, but it can really hurt your lungs. So educate these kids more on the effect of drugs and vaping, of course, cigarettes and everything else. And really pay attention to them because they're the future of Charlottesville. If we don't deal with it now, we're going to be in the same situation that we're in right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snook. Yes.
I'm going to start with this answer where I started my campaign 4 years ago. I think the single most important problem that council actually has power over is that we continue to rebuild the city government. We've made very important strides in the right direction over the last 3.5 years, but we're not done with that yet. For example, and Natalie mentioned the problem of sidewalks. One of the reasons we weren't building sidewalks all these years was we didn't have the project managers who could make sure that the work was going to get planned and executed. And one of the things we did in last year's budget cycle was we said to the city manager, find a way to hire some more project managers so that some of these things can get done. Our deputy city manager, Sam Sanders, had looked at the situation. People were saying, well, why are we not building these sidewalks? Why are we building up a $600,000 reserve in the sidewalk fund? And the answer was because there was nobody to spend the money. And that's nuts. So that's one thing we've got to continue to work on. Things like getting our boards and commissions working better. That's something the council needs to take some responsibility for. Something other things like hiring, just rebuilding the workforce, rebuilding the police department. We're down still 20 or 30 police officers from where we ought to be. And Chief Kachis has some very specific thoughts about where he wants to put those people. And it's not going to be with an idea of, hey, let's go lock up a bunch more black people. But the black folks are actually asking for more policing. And we're not able to give it to them at this point. So this is the problem we've got to continue to focus on. We as council, I've probably focused on this more than most other people on council, less concerned about the substantive issues, but more concerned about just the operational things that get us in the way, or that get in the way of solving the substantive issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fenwick, same question.
All right, Lewis, could you please repeat that question?
I certainly would, as soon as I figure that.
I think I know what it is, but I
It
just
is,
want
what is the single most significant goal you wish to achieve
to.
in the next 4 years?
To me, Charlottesville, and our community, the single most important thing is the people. And all of what we discussed up here tonight and in the other forums we've had, it's about people, how we interact with one another. If we feel comfortable having a conversation, or are we defensive and waiting for the wrong word to be said to us? And that includes working with the city. There was a situation where a young lady was trying to get a question answered. She tried for 1 year to get a phone call returned on a very important issue. And nobody ever returned her call. We just have to get through this barrier, and we are making progress, but we have to keep plugging away at this thing. We've gone through a lot of trauma, all parts of the city. We behaved in a way that I think we did the best we could during that situation. And then the pandemic hit. And now what usually would be a full auditorium has probably as many people on Zoom as they do as you all coming down here. So it's a community that we cherish. My wife and I moved down here not because of the buildings or the mountains. We came because the people were friendly. You could drive downtown and I mean, we both were up in New England for a while, and you know what happens up there when if you get in front of somebody. It was a different way of living down here. And all of my efforts, if I'm successful on council, if you trust me with your vote, will be to rebuild the community spirit that is so important to what we do across the board.
Thank you very much. So the next question is.
Could I interject for a second?
Certainly.
I just want to point out that for all the people who are watching on Zoom at home, please feel free to send a question into the chat, and we'll try to incorporate those into the process. You matter just as much as the people who are here.
Thank you, John. That's very good. So I'm going to expand this question a little bit. It started with what local, but I'm going to expand it to local, state, and national. What local, state, or national politician, past or present, is an inspiration to you, Mr. Payne?
Politician?
That was the question. So you could use the word statesman, statesman.
Well, all right. I guess if we stick with politicians, I would say Senator Bernie Sanders, and I respect that people criticize him for saying the same thing for decades, because it's true. The country has abandoned our working class, and I appreciate their tenacity on that issue.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper, same question.
Oh, you make it so hard.
You know what your answer is.
There's so many. I'm gonna say Jennifer Carroll Floyd. Last year, when I was in my booth, me and John met with her. She kind of lit a fire underneath me to want to run. So I took that home and thought about it, like, that's probably too much. I don't want to do that. So I was like, you know what, let me make the call, made the call, met with her again, had 2-hour conversation with her, still talk to her now. She's a great mentor to me. I just like the fire she brings. So that's somebody I look up to and possibly want to be like, it would probably be her.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you.
Mr. Snook, same question, please.
Yeah, you know, this is gonna sound perhaps like a cop-out because it's a pretty easy answer. Barack Obama. For his intelligence, for his eloquence, for being a deep thinker about a lot of very difficult issues. And for not being afraid to be seen to be intelligent. So many politicians are deathly afraid of letting anybody know that they're smart. And Barack Obama was very good at letting it's okay to be smart. And I think if we can reinstill that spirit in more of what we do in city governance, we've got, my joke is Charlottesville is 50,000 people, 40,000 people, 40,000 of those people think that they're the smartest people in the room. 20,000 of them probably are. How do you govern that group? Well, one of the ways you govern it is by not being afraid to be smart. And that's one of the things I've always admired about Barack Obama.
Thank you. Mr. Fenwick, please.
All right, so am I the last one on this
No,
question?
actually,
Okay.
you're not, Ms. Austin.
All right, well, I was gonna cheat on this question. Because Barack Obama is by himself as far as a standard to which we all should strive to meet. Tremendous difficulties, a tremendous sense of humor, not just as a president, but after the fact. And that's what you want in a president. You want somebody presidential. But I'm old school, so I'm going to say Hubert Humphrey. And half the people in here might not remember. Maybe the Zoomers don't. Hubert Humphrey's nickname was the Happy Warrior. He enjoyed politics. The politics is all about people. And I've always admired that. Somebody who he lost a presidential election, but he always came to work and he worked hard without making a lot of enemies. So those are the two people that I think that I admire the most as a politician.
Thank you. Ms. Austin, same question, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. As soon as it was asked, my mind started going through the Rolodex of who's good to choose. Is it a young dynamic leader like AOC? Is it a great teacher who is such a nerd and knows how to explain everything really well, like Elizabeth Warren? Is it someone like Maxwell Frost, who's 25 and is representing in Florida? And bringing another great young voice to a state that desperately needs some help. But it came actually back to someone most of you are not going to have ever heard of, Martha Robertson. She is a former Tompkins County, New York, what their equivalent of city council is. She's my aunt, and she has been fighting for her community to be more progressive, to be more sustainable, to be more thoughtful and caring for as long as I've known her. And she ran for Congress a couple of years ago. Ithaca itself, much like Charlottesville, is a blue city surrounded by a bunch of red. So her district was not in her favor, unfortunately. But watching her and hearing her experiences and seeing the amazing teams that she's put together, and how she is a singular person in an amazing environment, and how she's crafted that for herself, and leads and shows up and cares so much, has been really amazing.
Thank you. So Mr. Payne's response is kind of like all of us have when we hear the word politician. So when I think of politician, I think of the folks running the school board, the folks that are on the mayor and council, the folks that do countless hours for very small pay and spend a lot of their time, and they're the nuts and bolts that keep our government working in communities. and especially the folks that are doing it on the local level. So when I think of politician, that's what I think of, and we really appreciate the folks that are putting themselves out there. So next question is, Albemarle County has its first 2 new battery electric school buses. UVA has ordered its first set of electric transit buses. Charlottesville Transit is studying the issue. Why or why not do you believe Charlottesville should soon get the EV school buses and our transit? You favor any related changes or preparations for the city's acquisition of EV vehicles? So first up on that one is Mr. Cooper.
Again, common sense, let's just do it. Of course, be cautious about it, because like I said, everything has a consequence. So it's just a no-brainer after the study's done. Let's, look at the numbers, look and see how much, it's gonna cost, and let's invest into it.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Snook, please.
So let me just amplify a little bit on what Deshad said. There's a study that is going to be coming out in probably the next few months that is required by federal law in order for us to buy buses. When what's required, and this is important because the feds and the state pay 97% of our costs of the buses. So if they don't approve what we're doing, it becomes ridiculously expensive. And so one of the choices that they are going to be studying is whether we are presently at the point where the cost curves have crossed, so that it is now, or by the time we would get the buses 2 years from now, that it would be more economical for us to go with electric vehicles. I believe that the answer is going to be yes. I believe that the report that is going to come out is going to say that either that basically that EVs are an acceptable choice for federal funding at this point. And if we can't, because obviously, if we can't get that 97% of the cost paid, we're not going to be able to do it. The transit plan that is being discussed right now is going to require a lot more buses by probably 5 to 10 years from now. It takes 2 years from the moment you snap your fingers before a bus arrives. So we've got a long lead time on all of this stuff. It's going to be a 5 or 10 year project to buy enough buses. I think it's time to get started on it. I hope that the results of the study will be that we will be able to start with that, and we'll be able to start with it right now.
Right. Mr. Fenwick, the same question.
All right, well, for years I've preached about getting smaller buses. I have never seen a bus loaded from the city. I have seen UVA and their buses loaded when the students change class. But I've never seen, and I've seen mostly the buses that come through downtown. So to me, that was always, I always wondered why, and I would get a 3-minute answer that told me nothing from staff. So it's smaller buses, equip every bus stop with a shelter. Nobody's gonna sit around waiting for a bus, whether it's gasoline or diesel or battery or whatever. That's not gonna make any difference to them. They're not gonna stand there when it's 20 degrees and the wind is blowing or it's raining. But I'm gonna come back to what I said at the very beginning, and that's sooner or later, somebody's gonna raise the question of where are these batteries manufactured? Are we just outsourcing our problems to another country and letting the children in those countries, child labor, where we don't see them every day, bear the brunt of our furthering of what we would like to see in our environment? So I think that's very important, and sooner or later, people are going to catch on to that. I just have a question. Where are they made?
Thank you. Ms. Oshrin, same question.
Yeah, thank you. I think those are some good questions to ask. The electric vehicles are absolutely a thing that's happening now. With the shift to those, there's a lot of talk about, great, reducing emissions. If you take a picture of traffic now and you say, hey, look, these are all going to be electric cars, you're still not solving the problem of traffic and transit and transportation in general. More buses, any way we can get them is good, especially considering the lead time that Mayor Snook has described. In the meantime, in the short term, what folks are going to do on their own is buy their own personal electric vehicles. That's not, again, going to help with traffic transit or wear and tear on roads or road noise, which is what affects the neighborhoods. So we need to get more buses, and reducing emissions is absolutely great and important. We cannot let that be at the expense of a good bus system. A bus running that works, that gets people out of their cars and onto the system, coupled with, again, bike lanes and sidewalks and bike lanes. You'll hear me say that forever and always, to get actual more cars off the road and more people out of them, as well as developing a non-car centric community by increasing the amount of people who are able to live in town and they're not commuting from surrounding counties. That's most of the traffic in town anyway. That's going to go much farther towards helping our overall emissions from the city. Getting buses that are electric is obviously good and the way of the future, but that is not the only solution we have to reduce emissions overall. We need to do things in the meantime to make fewer people get in their cars in the first place.
Thank you. Mr. Thane, please.
Sure. I think for school buses, the transition to electric school buses should happen immediately and as soon as we can. It's a lot easier there because they don't need mid-route charging infrastructure. And since they're off the road during the middle of the day, it's much easier. CAT bus system is a harder lift because you need mid-route charging infrastructure in order for it to work in the system to have reliable, fast routes. But I think we are in a unique position to pursue it because there is billions of dollars in money through the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law, specifically for mid-route charging stations, municipal bus electrification, and school bus electrification. That money is not going to be available forever. So it's critical that we aggressively pursue it right now, because that is going to fundamentally change the question of cost for us as a locality. The other piece of it that I think is important is that Charlottesville cannot switch our bus fleet to compressed natural gas. And the reason that is so important is the way that federal funding works. If we switch our fleet to that, we are going to lock in that infrastructure for over a decade, and we will delay our ability to transition to electric vehicles. And it's critical that we avoid that. And the final thing, as Natalie and others have touched on, it's critical that you have to build towards creating a regional transit authority that's having faster, more reliable routes, so people actually use the bus as an alternative. I think if we do that, combined with electric vehicles and unionized, highly paid bus drivers to actually drive them, which is the foundation of it all, I think we can really get to a place where we're reducing emissions and people are using the bus as an alternative.
Thank you. So the next question deals with housing and with the planning and zoning. So question is, what is your stance regarding building in the floodplain along the Ravenna River? If you were in favor, what guarantees would we have that the housing would actually be affordable? Mr. Snook.
Well, first of all, just to be clear, the proposal to be building in the floodplain on the old circus grounds on East High Street, I don't think anybody is trying to claim that that's going to be affordable housing. It's not designed to be, it's not intended to be, and I doubt that, and there may be a few units in there that would end up being affordable, but I don't think so. That's not the reason why the proposal is being made. I think that the city, as the council doesn't really have a vote in the initial zoning question that is coming up. The Planning Commission and the Neighborhood Development Services folks have been trying to fight against this proposal in a number of ways by saying, you haven't solved the access problems. You haven't solved this problem, that problem. Well, the developers are coming up with other solutions. I think the only solution that makes any sense is for the city to say, and this is a city council issue at this point, is to say, The way we keep that land undeveloped is to buy it to be used as a park. We don't have the power or the right to tell a private property owner, you can't develop your property for any purpose. We just don't. And so if we're going to try to assert that they don't have the right to build there, and I have no idea why it was zoned in such a way that would allow this project anyway, but it is, that's a problem that's been there for a long time. The only way we have to stop that is if we're gonna buy it. It is permissible to use the eminent domain power to buy land for parks. And that's something that we ought to seriously consider. May be expensive, but there are funding sources out there, grants and so on for property acquisition, and we may decide that that's the way we want to go.
Mr. Fenwick,
Well, I'm against building in the floodplain. My background is engineering and construction management. There are so many problems, especially in a place like Hog Waller. That's got a lot of fill. And if you think about what you read about New Orleans, the delta down there is sinking because it's fill on top of fill on top of fill. And the weight of the structures plus the weight of the fill that's already there is slowly dropping that elevation down. So it's very difficult. You can do it. You can do almost anything if you have the money, but there's so many difficulties. And one of the other, since there's so many difficulties, so many hoops that really has to go through, if we retain the provisions of the current zoning code, there would be steps that the builder would have to go through. If we go to the new code, they're going to get almost all of that by right. Excuse me. So I agree that purchasing the property, however way we can, in a fair way, that the owner gets a fair return on his investment. And it will not be affordable housing because there are already plans, or they're talking about making the riverfront sort of like the people in Texas made. I forget what city it was in, Houston maybe, where they call it the waterfront.
San Antonio.
San Antonio, thank you. And that is not affordable housing down there. It wouldn't be up here. We have other places that we can put affordable housing. And Charlottesville has 10.2 square miles. The county has the top part of the river, the bottom part of the river. So there's a lot of things we got to worry about, but to get right to the question, I'm against building in the floodplain.
thanks. Ms. Oshrin.
I am in a unique situation amongst the five of us up here in that those buildings would literally be in my front yard. I live on Caroline Avenue, about 3 houses down from the entrance to the trail in the park there. So I have a up close and personal view of that land and what my neighbors think and feel about it. You all have probably seen the no floodplain buildings that are around. They're not wrong. It's when I first saw the plans, because we got, the neighborhood distribution of the information that's going to happen, or what's they're planning on doing there. My initial gut reaction to it was housing. And then I looked at the plans and it was parking, because there's 200 and something units and 300 and something parking spots. So the footprint of the buildings is only so much, but then acres of asphalt adding to the impervious surface that's going to affect the river and the floodplain down the way to cause more problems for folks down there. Then you start looking at the environmental concerns in addition to that about building on a floodplain and having an 18-foot retaining wall and how that would be even more environmentally detrimental. It's not the best place to build. And again, we don't have much to do, it's by right as it is. The fact that we're even talking about eminent domain is thrilling. I think that is a great use of that power, and keep making it a park, not parking. That's very important for the health and wellness of our city. And not just because I live there. Like I said, folks walk down my street all the time to get to the trail. It's a great community resource. There's over 564 empty lots in Charlottesville. let's have developers focus on making those somewhere where folks can live.
Thank you. Mr. Tang.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been clearly and publicly opposed to it from the beginning, like others. I think there's so many ways that it's a bad idea, run down some of them. One, under the new draft zoning, this would not even be permitted. The density is going down at that site. Two, they're avoiding affordable housing requirements by trying to get it in under a deadline before any inclusionary zoning requirements apply, so they can build it with no affordable housing on site. And the bigger issue in question, as others had mentioned, is the issue of floodplain development and the fact that the city has an urban Rivanna River corridor plan that calls for the Rivanna to be maintained as a natural asset that's publicly accessible. And this is some of the most critical land if we're ever going to realize that vision. You can see how the Rivanna River Company could use that space to be a park that's publicly accessible and becomes one of the signature places in Charlottesville. I was at the Rivanna River Fest this weekend, and you can just easily see how that could be the future for it. And if you pave over it and build parking, you remove that possibility forever, combined with the fact that I don't buy for a second that 18 to 19 foot of fill is not going to have legitimate environmental risk for the Rivanna and the watershed. And as others mentioned, they're claiming it's by right. I think that is a dubious claim in some ways that the city should continue to press. And I think that eminent domain and purchasing it should be on the table. Eminent domain was how Tonsler Park was expanded many years ago. There is a precedent for it. And the final thing is, I think this taps into a bigger structural issue where our floodplain development regulations are woefully inadequate. Our staff gave us a presentation of a ranking of the strength of our regulations. Our score was literally 0. We have way more work to do in terms of strengthening our environmental regulations on floodplain development, critical slope waivers, et cetera. And we owe it to the community to get that right at the same time that we're going to be approving a zoning plan that will allow for greater density in places. You have to do both of them at the same time, and it's not either or.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper, if you would end that question for us.
I mean, I'd be preaching to the choir. I agree with each and every one of them. I don't live down there. I do canoe with friends on the river. And I think it's a beautiful place. Just as Lloyd said, let's just go ahead and purchase it. Making sure developers do not take it over. Listen to the people, listen to the science, and let's save the environment.
Thank you. So I think that probably concludes our time as far as the questioning. We're bumping up against the end. So the last part of the forum is a 2-minute summation by each candidate to give basically your final thoughts to the audience. Mr. Sinwick, you go first, please.
All right, as I looked for my notes, I knew I was going to be first here. Well, let me say a few words about zoning. Because that's, as I go around the city, there's 3 things people talk about most: zoning, taxes, and the violence. So let me talk about the zoning. Here's what we want from zoning. First and foremost, citizens expect a substantial say in how their city grows. We are not obstructionists. We, both homeowners and renters, are the bill payers. We are told that we need to broaden our tax base. Broadening our tax base doesn't mean any tax relief for us. It means our taxes go up. We have increased the tax base consistently over the past 10 to 15 years, and the taxes have never come down. Second, during the design development stages, citizens expect honesty, transparency, and respect, with appropriate penalties for non-compliance from start to finish. I'll give you an example. We don't want to hear what a favor the university or other special interest is doing for the citizens in providing jobs and substantial increases in tax revenue, because we are the ones paying the taxes. Unless the university also wants to acknowledge how fortunate they are to have a local work source, as talented, hardworking, and generous as we are. So I think that covers it.
Thank you. Ms. Ostrom, if you could follow up.
Yeah, gladly. Thank you all so much for your attention tonight. Thank you both for putting this on. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the important things that City Council can do to address the concerns of our neighbors. I encourage you to check out my website, nat4cville.com. It's the number 4. For more info about my platform or to sign up to volunteer or request a yard sign. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at nat4cville for more info and up-to-date posts. We can continue to make progress on housing, transit choices, and safety. These are intertwined and they have to be addressed simultaneously in order for a difference to be made and that difference to be felt. I'm looking forward to representing Charlottesville in a progressive and equitable way. As you all know, Election Day is the 20th with early voting through the 17th, including Saturdays, the 10th and the 17th. I ask for your support and your vote to help all of our citizens move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thane, your summation, please.
Sure. Yeah, and thank you all for putting it together. Thank you all for coming out here and for the questions as well. I thought this was a really great discussion tonight. And yeah, you know, like I said in the beginning, it's been a difficult few years for Charlottesville, but I still think we've done some incredible things in recent years. You look at the units at Friendship Court about to come online, folks being able to move into Crescent Halls in June, our climate action plan leading the state and local climate action, the work happening in public transportation. There is so many incredible things that we've been able to work on together as a community. And I don't say that to spike the football and say everything's great, but I think it's worth celebrating that collectively as a community with local government, we can make a positive change, but we have a lot more work to do. We have a tremendous amount of inequality in this city. We have a lot more work to do in terms of rebuilding city government and getting it fully staffed. We have a climate crisis that continues to run out of control with additional implementations for a climate action plan needed. But I think that together, collectively as a community, we can get there. And I've been in the trenches the past 3.5 years on the local government side working on these issues. And I hope if reelected that I can continue to do that work and we can actually start to see some of these things get over the finish line.
Mr. Cooper, please.
Thank you. Thank you, John, Aaron, Suzanne, Nancy, and Louis. Appreciate y'all. Thank all of the viewers and thank everybody here for coming. Like I said, growing up here, I actually watching the city from both cylinders. I am an employee of the city and also a resident. So I can see 2 aspects of everything. You know, the city has a lot of work to do. And I believe with myself on there and whoever else is elected, we can make that come true. I'm also on the ground a lot. I'm at social service, so I'm dealing with the homelessness, the mental health, and of course the housing crisis. I get multiple questions of that every day. But at the end of the day, continue to stay transparent to the people, continue to listen to the people, and continue to make sure that the people have a voice at the table. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Mr. Snook, you will close us out, please.
Sure. I said a couple of times tonight that I thought that the single biggest issue for the city is stability in leadership at the top. We have that to a certain extent, and in the last couple of years that we did not have for many years before that, from the city manager's office on down within the administration, on city council itself. That has been, in terms of the council, that has been a product of who you all have nominated and elected. And I hope that you will exercise similar wisdom this time around. We've had a lot of challenges in the city going back to 2017. Obviously, the events of 2017 are what I say is a bell that continues to ring. It continues to reverberate. The reverberations may be getting fainter, but they're still there. We've had COVID and the Great Resignation and a lot of the costs that has imposed on our staff. But in the last couple of years, we've really done a number of very important things. Michael has talked about the bills that or the ordinances we've been able to pass. I'd like to talk just a second about the budget, because the last year's budget, we were able to do a couple of things that were very important. The first thing we were able to do was to continue to fund at the rate of more than $10 million a year our affordable housing efforts. The second thing we were able to do was to finally get approval for the Buford reconfiguration. And then this year, of course, we had to add more money to the pot because of inflation and so on. But the point was, we actually did something that we had talked about for a decade. And that's important. We've got things like the Belmont Bridge. We finally did the final approval on it'll be done next year. What can I say? LED streetlights, I said that before, bike lanes and sidewalks. I'm hoping we get the project managers and get all of the infrastructure going to be able to do that. We finally passed the comp plan only 4 years late. We finally passed the affordable housing plan only 3 years late. And the zoning rewrite is underway. So lots of good stuff we've been doing, like to continue to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So that concludes our forum. I'm going to turn it back over to John just a second. From a personal note, I'd really like to thank the candidates. I think they were all impressive, did a good job. It was a very learning experience for me. So thank you all for your participation. Well, let's give them a hand. John, if you'd like to say the closing remarks.
Oh, yeah, well, thank you, Louis. Fine job moderating. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you, Buford staff and principals, and thank the candidates. And we are planning to post the recording of this event shortly online. I have to figure out how to do that. We'll figure out how to do that so that everyone can rewatch it at your leisure. Hope to see folks at the Jefferson School on June 2nd for our spectacular second annual summer bash, 6 o'clock p.m. And you can get tickets for that on cvilledems.org. Thank you very much. Good night.
So I would say that you can.
Well, just get a group photo before you all.
Sure.
So